In an episode from last week, we discussed some key tendencies from the Commanders and how the Eagles might try to take advantage of them to slow down the red-hot Washington offense. So let's look back and see how the Eagles handled some of those tendencies. We'll start with containing Jayden Daniels as a scrambler. Like we talked about, a key factor in containing a quarterback that scrambles as much as Daniels is to play with good rush lane integrity. We saw that on the first play of the game. Jalen Carter took advantage of the backup right guard and quickly ripped past him and forced Daniels off his spot. He wasn't able to bring him down, but Nolan Smith did an excellent job of working to the depths of the quarterback, then falling back underneath when he took off. He didn't collect a sack, but he stopped Daniels for a 1-yard gain. For the most part, the Eagles played with good rush lane integrity throughout the game, pressuring Daniels when they had the opportunity, but working to stay in their lanes when they couldn't. This play from Moro Ojomo was a good example. It looks like he's going to run a stunt with Carter, but something gets messed up, so instead of continuing to rush inside, he works back outside to keep Daniels boxed in. And speaking of stunts, we talked about different ways they could use stunts to influence scrambles before closing off gaps. The Eagles elected to use a plethora of twists between the interior defensive line while mixing in some other stunts between the edge rushers and defensive tackles. Here we see how the Eagles use a stunt between Jalen Carter and Milton Williams. Like usual, the Commanders double-teamed Carter at a high rate, and this stunt helps to get him a one-on-one opportunity. Carter is aligned as the 2Y on the inside shade of the guard, and he works back across the face of the center. He wins quickly with a powerful club and gets Jayden Daniels to move off of his spot. By vacating the left side, Jayden now thinks he has space to scramble through, but Milton Williams is looping around from the other side to close off the space and forces Jayden into a panic throw. There was a plethora of interior stunts in this game, but those weren't the only ones used. Here we see an ET stunt with Josh Sweat penetrating first before Carter loops back around. Milton Williams pushes left guard Nick Allegretti into Daniels' lap, and he looks to scramble right, which he does at the highest rate in the league, but Carter is waiting for him. Sweat was pushed farther inside than he intended, but he reads the situation and loops around to contain Daniels and force a throwaway on 3rd down. Late in the game on 4th and 11, the Eagles are running what appears to be a flush stunt, designed to get Daniels to break the pocket. Jalen Carter initially stabs at the guard and then backs off, waiting for Daniels to scramble while also rerouting and probably holding the running back, while Bryce Huff spins inside. Huff loses his footing but gets Daniels to scramble out of the pocket, and we see Nolan Smith blow right past the left tackle on one of the very few plays that Nolan didn't use a bull rush, and he collects a sack as a stunt influences Daniels to hold on to the ball longer while he breaks the pocket. Let's talk about Nolan Smith for a moment. Last week, we highlighted how Daniels scrambles to his right at the highest rate in the league, and if you're the edge rusher on that side, you need to be aware of that. When working against the right tackle, Nolan used bull rushes on nearly every rep. This allowed him to prevent Daniels from scrambling outside to his right and also made it easier to work to the depths of the quarterback instead of getting pushed way up the field trying to use speed rushes. It was largely a successful strategy as all of Jayden's scrambles came up the middle as opposed to outside to the right. Nolan ends up losing contain on this play, but because of the bull rush, he was able to keep Daniels in front of him, so when Daniels looks to break the pocket, he can't attack vertically. He is forced to bubble 4 to 5 yards backwards, which gave time for the rest of the pass rush to help out. And we see Ojomo with excellent effort and pursuit to prevent Daniels from picking up yards with his legs. The Eagles weren't perfect containing Daniels on the ground, as he had 4 scrambles for 31 yards. On one rep, we see what happens when Nolan Smith works way too far past the depth of the quarterback, but the biggest culprit in this scramble is Jalen Carter ending up on his face, so he can't maintain his rush lane. But Nolan isn't able to work back underneath when Daniels takes off like we saw on the first play. We also saw a couple reps where Milton Williams was pushed too far out of his rush lane, opening up lanes for Daniels to scramble up the middle. But ultimately, the Eagles held Jayden Daniels to 4 scrambles on 55 dropbacks, and that 7% scramble rate was below his 12% regular season average. Before we move on to looking at some of the other tendencies the Eagles took advantage of, let's talk about the pass rush for a second. The pass rush overall was a big factor in limiting Daniels. Left guard Nick Allegretti, who was 48th in pressure rate allowed among qualifying guards, was beat like a drum, giving up 5 pressures and constantly getting pushed back into the lap of the quarterback. We knew this was going to be a big matchup coming into the game because we anticipated that the Commanders were going to give a lot of attention to Jalen Carter with right guard Sam Cosmi out for the game. Left tackle Brandon Coleman, who was 49th in pressure rate allowed among qualifying tackles, didn't fare much better. But I want to look at one particular rep against Jalix Hunt as it shows Hunt's growth this season. In the summer, I highlighted this rep from Hunt to discuss how you would need to improve his technique. First is his stance. He's not in a loaded stance at the snap, so he's not maximizing his get off. Then, when he attempts to use his cross cross chop. He launches off his inside foot, but when he lands on his outside foot, his hips and shoulders are pointed up the field, causing him to have to take extra steps to turn and get moving towards the quarterback. Flash forward to the NFC Championship. He's loaded in his stance to maximize his get off, but this time, when using his cross chop, he launches off his inside foot, and when he lands, his hips and shoulders are already directed towards the quarterback. So when he steps through with his inside foot and then drives with his outside foot, he's able to flatten and get moving towards the quarterback much faster. It's amazing to see how far he's come this season, and this looks like another home run pick for the Eagles. Moving on, let's talk about some tendencies the Eagles took advantage of. In the preview, we mentioned that Jayden Daniels had 34 designed rollouts to his right and 3 to his left this season. Add into that, in 12 or 13 personnel, you must be alert for a rollout when tight end John Bates is aligned in the slot close to the end man on the line of scrimmage. Here we see John Bates in that position, although they're in 21 personnel, but the same principle still applies. Nolan Smith recognizes John Bates in a tight alignment from the slot and is alert to the play action. He quickly works outside of the block and doesn't allow Daniels to roll outside to his right. This forces Daniels to abandon the play, and Oren Burks winds up with the sack. Again, in the preview, we talked about when the Commanders like to take shot plays and what personnel and formations they like to use. Between the 40s is when they like to throw the ball further down the field, particularly out of 12 personnel, and especially on first down, as their average depth of throw in 12 personnel in all areas of the field on first down was 12.1 yards versus 9.2 on second down. The particular formation they love taking shot plays out of was this 2x2 ace formation with offset tight ends. So when the Commanders came out in 12 personnel on the Eagles' 41-yard line on 2nd and 10, Fangio went with cover 3 match. It plays out very similar to cover 1, but it allowed them to play much tighter on the curl flat combination that the Commanders were running, and Daniels opts for the check down. In the second quarter, this time on 1st and 10 on their own 44-yard line after the Eagles just missed a field goal, the Commanders came out in 12 personnel again, and again aligning their ace formation, this time with Terry McLaurin aligned wide. We highlighted in the preview that McLaurin is more likely to run crossing routes when aligned condensed in this formation, and go routes when aligned wide. I'm not sure if this is a formational check, but they play cover 8, which ends up being cover 2 to Terry McLaurin's side, allowing the defense to essentially cap the top of McLaurin's go route. On the backside, they're playing quarters, and with the tight ends chipping then releasing, it frees up the safety to bracket the dig route from Diami Brown. McDaniels has nowhere to go, but unfortunately, this is one of those times the front allowed Daniels to scramble. Still, you want to take away the back-breaking big plays the Commanders have hit on so many times this season. 2 more plays to highlight. Rookies Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean made big plays on the same bunch formation flanker screen. This all came down to formation recognition. One of the Commanders' staple screens comes from this bunch formation, but it's important to note the location of the bunch. Whenever the Commanders are in a tight bunch, and I consider tight within 5 yards off the end man of the line of scrimmage, they're going to run drop back or play action passes from the bunch. But when the bunch is aligned further outside, then it's a significantly higher chance it's going to be a screen. The rookies were aware of the formation, and while they didn't know for certain it was going to be a screen, they're alert and keying for the screen and ready to jump the route. Notice Zach Bond on this play as well. He's blitzing, but he recognizes the formation as well and takes one step up the field before working back to try to get into the throwing window. Last play. One of the Commanders' favorite RPO plays came out of 11 personnel when in these 2x2 sets, with the back aligned and gun near, which means he's aligned to the side of the tight end. But the key that often gave away the play was the alignment of the wide receiver. When aligned wide, it was more likely to be a zone read with the tight end working up to the second level, but when aligned tight, it was likely to be this hitch flat RPO. We see the wide receiver aligned tight, so it's an alert for the RPO. The Eagles are running one of their favorite creeper pressures called whip, but I think there was a game plan adjustment to the pressure. Traditionally, when running whip, the weak side linebacker is going to blitz through the weak B gap and trips, or on the 2 receiver side of empty formations, with the opposite edge rusher dropping into coverage. We see exactly that when they ran whip earlier in the game against the trips formation. In 2x2 formations like we see here, usually the linebacker to the side of the running back is going to blitz unless making a change by game plan. On this play, against this formation, we see the linebacker away from the running back blitz. My guess is so that the edge rusher dropping into coverage can help take away the flat route on the RPO. You can see Bond emphatically communicating with Burks pre-snap. Jalix Hunt ends up getting caught in the traffic on the hitch route, and I bet in the future they'll coach him up to chase this route underneath the hitch as he has help over top from the safety rotating down. but the pass gets batted down anyway. Looking at the tight view, Milton Williams is likely keyed into the RPO as well. With the edge rusher dropping into coverage, he is now the contain rusher and has to work to the edge. He gets to the edge, but he doesn't appear to have any interest in working up the field. Rather, he's moving to get into the throwing window to bat the pass down. On the surface, this appears to be incredible instincts from Milton, but the thing about instincts is it's often a result of preparation, recognition, and repetition. And look at this quote from Milton Williams, courtesy of Tim McManus in his article highlighting Vic Fangio's defensive mind. After reading that quote, I have to imagine Milton knew exactly what play was coming. The Eagles' defense wasn't perfect on Sunday. They allowed 104 yards on 11 receptions to Zach Ertz, although it took 16 targets to get there, and that's something we'll discuss more when previewing the Chiefs matchup. And they did give up 23 points, which is above their season average, but they held Jayden Daniels to his lowest yards per attempt of any game he's finished this season, and they forced 3 turnovers. The Eagles' defense, behind the mind of Fangio, was one step ahead of the Commanders.